Welcome to HCD's Mindset. I'm Michelle Nigella.
And I'm Kathryn Ambrose.
We are on a mission to help you identify what consumer science innovations have a lot of untapped value or are too good to be true.
So join us for more curious conversations as we try to make sense of the complex but fascinating world of human behavior. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to HCD's Mindset. It is your hosts, Kathryn, and Michelle is here too.
Hello, everybody.
We're so excited to have two guests with us, and we are doing a journal club episode. However, it's a very special episode because we actually have the two authors with us today to discuss the paper that they wrote. So I'm going to let them introduce themselves, but Rachel, would you mind doing the first intro?
Sure. Thank you. I am Rachel Herz. I'm a neuroscientist with a special expertise in the psychological science of our sense of smell. I have a research faculty appointments at Brown University and Boston College, and also teaching appointments there, as well as my own consulting company.
Awesome. And Martha, would you mind also introducing yourself?
Sure. I'm Martha Bajec, and I am Senior Scientific Consultant with HCD Research, and also principal of my own consulting organization, Bajec SenseWorks.
Awesome. And we are so excited to chat with both of you. Before we hop into the paper, how did the two of you connect? Where did you meet?
And who wants to say that? Martha, you or me?
You go ahead, Rachel. You're such a good storyteller.
So I met Martha at ACAMS, at the Association for Chemoreception Sciences annual meeting. And when I first met her was when it was briefly in Los Angeles and Huntington Beach. She may have been at prior ACAMS's. Typically it's in Florida, but it did do a little segue in Huntington Beach for 2 years. I remember meeting.
Where did you meet her there?
At the swimming pool. She was climbing out of the swimming pool. She was wearing a black bathing suit.
Look at you, Martha. That's where I met her too.
That's where
I met her in the hot tub in LA at ACAMS.
Martha's just on the network.
Martha's likes the water. I think she likes being wet.
You got it. Yep.
That's so funny.
So sorry, continue on.
so that was, I think I remember John Hayes was sitting there with a bunch of people sitting around. Maybe the hot tub, maybe it was like the hot tub was right there connected. But anyway, we were having some conversation, remember, about the DSM latest edition and various words that were going to be included and things to do with addiction. And it was a typical ACAMS argument, I guess, or discussion. And I thought going from there to now, something about Martha really appealed to me. I mean, I instantly liked her, and I instantly just felt an affection and interest in her. And I thought she was hilariously funny also. So
I was going to say, was it the sarcasm as well as the scientific drive? I think those are the things that appealed to me when I also met her in the water at ACAMS.
Martha, I feel like we have to go to an ocean somewhere now.
That's yes.
We'll just find a hot tub.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Which are exactly the kind of things we've all sort of missed about in-person meetings, right?
True.
Definitely.
And so you guys met at this wonderful, it seems like a very aquatic conference.
Very social.
Not
it was right on the beach. Yeah, it was beautiful. It was a really good time.
Decide to start working together after that conference, or had time passed? Tell us a little bit.
Well, this paper is the first time we've ever actually worked together. Our friendship evolved from that particular first meeting and then blossomed further and further over a number of years. I don't know, what year was that, Martha? Do you remember, Michelle, what that?
Yeah,
probably
Michelle,
was the same ACAMS.
It was after marriage, but before first child. So and I was at Mars. Is that true?
That sounds, yes.
So 2014?
Yeah, so it was the second year.
2013,
So
2014?
It was, I remember, okay, so I know that in 2013 we were at Huntington Beach. And I don't know if that was the first or the second time we'd been there.
That
So
could
was
be
either-
it. It's either 2013 or 2014. I'm not really sure.
Yeah, I'm gonna probably go with 20. Anyway, the point being, so subsequently I had only seen, I then also saw Martha at other ACAMSs. She's, like I said, really fun and funny. And, I just, like I said, have always felt this sort of instant affection for her, like kind of a, oh, Martha. we have affectionate names for each other, which I will not share here, but
Ooh.
it's definitely kind of
Okay, I
conveyed.
don't have nicknames with Martha, so our
It must be a
relationship has not
Canadian
grown to
thing.
that point yet. But to kind of jump in a little bit on the paper, I saw this when it was, I saw a couple of little cues to this. Martha had brought it up in conversation, I believe, once, and talking about this interesting thing they were looking at. She was looking at with you. And then also I saw like ideas of it being shared on LinkedIn at some point, I believe. Am I correct?
Yeah, so how it all started really is I had the idea to do this study, and I had put together this survey, and I had actually collected the data both at Boston College and at Brown, and then was that was like my undergraduate population set, and I was wanting the sort of what we called adult or general population, our Gen Pop group, second, a different phase of life group, and I had reached out to a couple of, real people that I knew I didn't want people who were working in olfaction to be part of this because I didn't want them, obviously they would know too
Obviously
much and have
biased. Yeah.
bias, exactly. But amongst them, I knew that Martha had a wide network of people that she could, for instance, post a link to the survey on something like LinkedIn, or people I was asking to post on Twitter. And the other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to bring Martha into this research, and she has worked so much in statistics in other aspects of her work. I thought this is going to be complicated, pain in the ass statistics that I would rather not have to deal with. And, let me ask Martha if she wants to get involved. And that's how it started. I actually remember that conversation. I was walking my dog in a park around here, and it was freezing cold winter. And I was having this conversation while I was talking to her on the phone, walking in the freezing cold. But
Aw. Well, so Martha, I'm curious, when she approached you about collaborating, I feel like Rachel was basically asking, do you want to start a band except for scientists?
Yeah.
And so what was your inclination to do this, especially because this isn't your typical world that you focus on in typically in olfaction?
Yeah, definitely. It was, I like the idea. I think it's really difficult for anybody to know each other's sensory or emotional sensory world. And I've always, so do you guys remember that Cure song, Why Can't I Be You?
Yeah.
I went into neuroscience and that kind of stuff to sort of figure out why can't I? Why don't I know what you feel and think? And this was sort of when Rachel described the research, it was like, well, this is a step going into what do you think? Like, how do we think differently? And now seeing all of the individual difference.
So what was that
coming up?
Rachel, what was that pitch you gave to her? If you're going to sum this up, what's the summary?
Well, I didn't know that about the Cure song, and had I known that, I would have led with that. I think I was just like, please, and wouldn't this be great? And finally, like, we can actually work together. I think it was, I didn't get her.
You weren't standing outside her window holding up the boombox.
Yeah.
But Rachel, can you share a little bit about what inspired you to look into this and just give us a brief overview about what it's about? I know we have, for people that are not watching on YouTube, we have a little snapshot of what it's titled, but we'll
have the link as well to the study in the description.
Exactly. But it's called Your Money and Your Sense of Smell, a comparative analysis of the sensory and psychological value of olfaction. So Rachel, can you just give us a brief overview of the study?
Yeah. So basically, I was capitalizing on the moment. I mean, this week I ran the study, in this sort of late winter, early spring of 2021. And so this is a total COVID inspired research platform where suddenly, and sort of the one, I think, good thing about COVID is that it has finally shone a spotlight on the sense of smell, and that a greater appreciation, as you mentioned before, like people suddenly realizing what smell loss is about and how so many people were affected by it. And a couple of little anecdotal experiences that I had over that year where, COVID had afflicted so many of us, including one person who came to me who had actually had, like, this was original, like wild type COVID, a really bad case of it, and had for a period of time lost his sense of smell, and said, forget the fact that I couldn't breathe. When I lost my sense of smell, that was the worst symptom. And I was really struck by, this is someone who did not have an olfaction background. It's not like this is their profession and they suddenly can't do their job anymore, which is, of course, another level of how it could be so traumatizing. But in any case, suddenly realizing, okay, well, maybe people are going to care so much more about their sense of smell now that they know about it. Now there's been so much media coverage. I mean, there was a big, huge New York Times article, so there was all kinds of media attention. And there really was almost nothing in the literature prior to this that had ever really looked at how little value or how much value in general is given to the sense of smell. There was a study done, I think it's 1999, that Paul Rosen and other people, that he was the sort of, it was his lab that it was done in. Amy Resniewski was the lead author on that. But they developed a questionnaire, so the importance of smell in daily life questionnaire, there was one question in that survey that asked for sort of relative to losing your little left toe, losing hearing in one ear, or your complete loss of your sense of smell, how do things rank? And losing your little left toe was equivalent to completely losing your sense of smell. So that was like the one other kind of data point that indicated that, there's a pretty trivial value given to the sense of smell, but really almost absolutely nothing beyond that. And that was sort of, in terms of pitching this paper from a publication perspective, sort of what's missing is the pre-COVID version of the study where we could go look at how people responded in 2018 and then how they responded in 2021. And then we would have like this great, perfect.
But you got to start somewhere.
Absolutely.
But, right. And that was why I was interested in the two groups, because I figured the college students would be more like, my sense of smell, who cares? Where I thought that actually the older group would be much more caring about their sense of smell than they were. I mean, they did care more than the younger group, but not as much more as I expected them to.
Well, I think that there is an opportunity in the future. I know you can't go backwards, but I would be curious to see if these effects held up after people have, in a sense, normalized COVID, and they've normalized the effects that some people have with COVID. And so
that is something that, so with an organization I'm part of, Smell and Taste Day, right? The World Smell and Taste Day. We are adapting this to be like on the website so that we can get a global reach as well, right? So really trying to get global data, expanding on what you have here. So that's something we'd like to work with as well. And I know it's something that I've spoken with both of you about, and it would be really interesting to explore.
No, I would really love to do that. And also one of the things about this survey, and we can maybe talk a little bit more about this and Martha can jump in too, is that we had I kind of came up with different categories of things. So it was comparing your sense of smell to hearing and vision, and then compared to these various commodities. So like things in life that you might care about. So physical things, like we had hair and we had little left toe, because I wanted to keep that, from the original Rosen study.
I was wondering where that came from.
Exactly. And then we had like these, what I would think of as like trivial monetary kind of physical possessions. So $10,000, so your money or your sense of smell, your cell phone, your favorite streaming service, a dream vacation, things that are, I would say, well, maybe your dream vacation could potentially not be replaceable, but everything else, there were definitely
like first world problems sort of thing.
Material kinds of goods. So material goods, we had some physical things, we had aspirational. I thought dream vacation was kind of along that line.
And then it gets kind of serious, right?
Yeah.
I mean, some of them got a little bit like dark.
Well, but I mean, but still, like, people were willing to like lose their sense of smell for their dream vacation in a far greater number than one would expect. And the other thing that was interesting was I chose sort of a really, I thought, significant personal item, but only one, which was your pet.
Right.
Which was,
That's
again,
what I was thinking of. We really
not-
got in there.
But also, you know, a lot of these things they're not defined. So one of the things was favorite streaming service, and actually social media. And we also had favorite social media. So social media, it seemed like people cared the least about that of all the commodities, which was also interesting given how much people are so addicted, it seems, to social media.
That's
But that was
surprising.
very loose. It wasn't like your TikTok account.
Right.
And likewise with respect to pet, I mean, what's interesting is this is anyone's interpretation of their pet, but, you know, we didn't say your budgie versus your dog or your fish or like, you know, so I think, and also with respect to the physical item of hair, that was a really interesting one, especially amongst women. I mean, over 40% of women overall were like, I would rather lose my sense of smell than lose my hair. So again, like you can wear a wig and your hair is not doing anything. It's not like it's not actually performing a physical function. It doesn't actually really keep you warm. Like, you know, so there's nothing about your hair that is doing something to really maximize your existence in the world. Whereas your sense of smell is critical for everything in life. So it was just really stunning. But again, you know, it was interesting. We didn't specify. So if we said body hair, for example, versus hair on your head, like there's a lot of things we could go into a lot more depth with respect to specificity, and also a lot more variations on the same type of thing, like with respect to pet and other personal kind of meaningful experiences.
I'm curious, did you screen out for people to ensure that every single person that took this had a pet? Or was this just the perception of their pet if they had one?
Well, that's a great question, because we did not at all have any way of checking that people's responses were based on personal experience with pet or just concept of pet in general. So yeah, another thing to potentially, you know, get more granular about is we had very little demographic individual difference data. And one of the really exciting things, Martha, maybe you want to talk about this, was how we really found that, you know, if we look at our college student sample and kind of presume they're sort of the elite, wealthier, or even actually we did actually collect where people thought they fell in terms of being lower, middle, or upper class. And if we even just sort of take that sort of segment of people who self-defined as being, you know, in the upper echelon of socioeconomics, that they cared a lot less about everything. They cared less about their pets. They cared less about everything. And that was something that we thought could potentially be really interesting to explore further. Like what privilege gives you in terms of your ability to go, well, I can just get another, right? Can you get another sense of smell? The answer is no. So, you know.
And, you know, that goes for the other senses as well. And so you focused on smell, hearing, and vision. And I have up the figure number 1, and it does talk about the willingness to give up each sense by the respondents. And Martha, maybe you want to chime in here, since I gather you did some of the statistical work here. What are we looking at?
Yeah, famous last words. I thought it was going to be easy. And then I really understood what kind of data we had, and I got all kinds of help and support. So you really can teach an old Martha new tricks. That was my takeaway from this. I learned so much. So yeah, basically what we found was that everyone is, I call it sacrificing, because I'm that kind of person. So, you know, in my head, we have the nice giving up. I think of it as sacrificing. So more people would sacrifice smell than hearing or vision. And that's against everything. So smell is still, you know, the ugly duckling cousin, whatever, to hearing and vision. People are obviously least willing to give up or sacrifice their vision for anything. And then what Rachel was talking about with pet and hair, those are huge things that kind of stood out here, especially, right? Like people, hair, it seems crazy, but when you actually stop and think about it a bit, it makes sense. It's such a personal defining characteristic that so many people, self-identifying as female, have, that of course it's important. People are
Hair could be a form of
emotionally injured.
expression
Exactly.
too.
Yeah. And I had to think back because one of the MS treatments that I had started made me lose my hair, and it was a lot of hair. It wasn't just a little bit. And I cut my hair really short and tried to hide it and I when I saw this, it didn't click, but then thinking about it more, during that time, I probably would have given up my smell if, as much as I like to think I wouldn't, but it was intense.
That's
so once you kind of, start.
It's very obvious here, just looking at it.
Pets. And these, we dug into it more, and that was very gender driven.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So the college population versus general population. So the age was significantly different between these two groups. So that's obviously, a pushing factor, where the younger groups give up almost everything more readily than the older, which I think, drives home the point too, that when you're thinking about these kinds of really almost existential pessimist questions of giving up pieces of yourself, right? Like you're taking away a form by which I interact with my world. Like that's a big deal that we older folk don't think the same as college kids, right?
There is something here that's kind of outward, right? So even if it's your hearing or your vision, that's more obvious to other people than if you lost your sense of smell, right?
Very much. Yeah.
And that makes me wonder if people, almost like you were sharing with these objects, like people say, this is my phone, this is, my social media, but they don't really think this is my sense of smell. They kind of take that for granted in a way. And it's like this universal thing that they've, and I'm speaking very generally right now, but they've probably not had the opportunity to really go that long without their sense of smell. And they don't know what the ramifications without it would be. Whereas if somebody was to imagine their life without their hair, I think that's probably easier to conceptualize to them what the effects of that would be in comparison. And I think that might be, and this is all speculation right now, but I think that might be what's driving these types of responses. What are your thoughts?
I think that's a really, really good point about that was sort of into my thinking as well. Like, this younger group would not really have a sense of life, as it were, the same way that the older group would. So that their willingness to, or their appreciation of things would be, very different as a function of that. But I also really like what you said about sort of the owning what it is. So like my hair, my pet, my phone versus, but my sense of smell, you're right. I think because it's internal, even, hearing and vision are such much more external senses that we interact. Other people can see whether or not we can see. Other people can hear or know that we can't hear. There's much more of a kind of a visible awareness of having these sensory functions. And not only are smells invisible, but the loss of being anosmic is an invisible disability, as it were, and much more so invisible than I think losing other sensory, well, at least vision and hearing. So I think that that's actually, that could be something interesting to explore with respect to somehow getting that more clear in the language of the questionnaire. One of the things, so the reason why I didn't include touch or taste, I figured, first of all, taste. We know that smell is critically involved in our experience of food and what flavors and everything else. But I figured since this is just going online with most minimal of instructions, taste, I thought people would think of as food. And with respect to touch, I thought, we're either going to get people thinking about sex or pain.
You're right.
So it's not going to really tap into
a little too complicated
experience.
Did you define any of these?
No, that was the whole point. That was if under other circumstances, actually would really like to talk to you, Michelle, about putting this on the website and sort of the instructions and a little bit maybe, increasing the detail and if this is going to be global, then also maybe there's a difference culturally in terms of what people care about in terms of phone versus money. Money, $10,000. To certain people, that would be huge. Versus,
well, that's why, in talking about it, we were wondering if you change the language instead of specifically $10,000, what if it's 2 months salary, right? which certainly, I mean, when you think about it in those terms, it can be a little more adaptable. But yeah, I think there's some interesting further questions and maybe just wording tweaks that could get at a slightly different nuance, right?
Yes. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Really interesting. And then you were seeing differences between men and women?
Yeah. So like, for example, if you look at the hair one in particular, I mean, I think that's classic. Also, very interesting in terms of this gender question. And we had male, female, non-binary, and prefer not to say as the options, but, it would be interesting to potentially mine the gender question further. I mean, here we have sort of the classic, this was just looking at self-identified males versus females. So we did not include the non-binary and the prefer not to say, which was very, very few people actually defined either, didn't define or had that. So we didn't drop that many people.
But maybe with a more global population, you could get, a larger number.
Yeah. But I mean, just look at, so 26.8% versus 41%. So very big difference between men and women there. Some of the ones though, there were also, if it's interesting, the vacation one. So over twice as many women would rather keep their dream vacation over their sense of smell than males would. So, I mean, it's interesting in looking at this idea, how gender plays into the value people have ascribed to different sorts of commodities. So there's definitely, and I think this is a fantastic first study that, like you said, this is a bookmark for, moving forward, how people would respond, looking, cross-culturally and sort of tweaking some of the language, but also mining some of these commodity topics more, like having more variations on what we think we're getting at when we're talking about material possessions versus physical, personal things, emotional things, the pet question and so on.
Right. I mean, I think about it myself because I keep on reflecting about sense of smell versus dream vacation. And the thing I keep going back to is that my dream vacation has to include my sense of smell for me personally, because that's part of, well, honestly, I'm thinking about like a dream vacation involves food. And that's so much part of my meals is just sitting there and smelling all the, the different aromas that come from the dish. And I find that very interesting that people don't really think that far. And it's more about the experience of actually going, like you said, going to, I don't know, touch the grass in a certain place of the world that they haven't seen, or touching the sand. Whereas they're willing to almost mute a part of that overall experience just to be able to say that they went to that length or they went to that dream place. What are your thoughts, Martha, Michelle, and Rachel? Would you give up your dream vacation for your sense of smell, or what are your inclinations? I've definitely primed you a little bit based on mine.
Well, so I guess the thing is that I guess in working and Rachel, maybe, you feel this a little bit too, but in working a bit more with anosmic groups, I think, it just lending a little bit of appreciation kind of goes in two directions, right? So obviously I don't want to lose my sense of smell, but also understanding that there are a lot of people out there that don't have a sense of smell and they still go on vacations, and they're still able to enjoy a lot of things as well. And so having, some respect for that as well. But, I wouldn't want to lose my sense of smell, I think more because it is one of my very important senses. So I don't know that I would give it up at all, for any of these things. But, appreciating that there are people that don't smell that can still enjoy all these things.
So I like this vacation anchor, because I started thinking, well, what would I give up for smell, right? Like where would pain? 100. So I guess that goes back to.
That's an interesting question that should maybe be added. What would you give up?
Well, yeah, like if you said you're not going to have pain or whatever level of pain.
Right.
I mean, you could have my baby toe, my smell. I mean, I would barter. That's open. And I wonder if other people feel the same.
Well, I think you're tapping into something which is really important, is that this is your personal life experience.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, you know what chronic pain is, and you know how debilitating that is, and how your life is compromised as a function of that, and how therefore getting rid of that would be so valuable for you. And so, I think all of this has to do with this kind of relative awareness of the physical state of one's body and existence in general, and how that impacts things. So I think that's a really, really important point. So where people are coming from in terms of their own life story, health story, experience story, really defines a lot about how people are going to react to losing one sense or another, compared to varying commodities and so on. So I think finding out more about the individuals who are taking the survey, it would also be really valuable, because of just finding out, like, we actually looked at in terms of disabilities, like we did look at, that whether or not someone was like really compromised in a certain sensory system without corrective device, like glasses or hearing aid and so on. And again, it was a very small number of people. We did have some people. We did also have some people that said they were compromised with their sense of smell, but obviously didn't have a corrective device. But it would be, and we weren't just saying like, you have to wear glasses, we were talking about like serious, but it would be really interesting to kind of look at that, and whether or not someone who is already, let's say, clinically blind, how would they feel versus someone who is, clinically deaf and so forth, and looking at these different populations and people with different levels of physical reality would be really useful.
I was also wondering this, since you were talking about kind of how you would order some of these things and do the comparisons, and I saw you were looking at, sort of probabilities and things of that sort. And I wondered, so you did this as a survey that people chose, right? They would choose for each one, questions that would come up. But did you think about other ways of sort of presenting this data? Because I'm thinking, when we have some of these nuances and you think these are very black or white, yes or no kind of questions you're asking, but there are nuances, right? And there are maybe pauses people take. So maybe I would say, you know what, I would rather lose my toe, but maybe it takes me a little longer to respond to that. Are there any other ways of asking these questions, to give it a little bit more granularity or rank order, so thinking either implicit sort of approaches or maybe a max diff sort of approach to look at how like a complicated tree of decision making happens?
So, one of the problems I think that's inherent to this kind of survey, especially an online platform like this is the fact that people took less than 3 minutes to complete the survey on
which
average.
Is a good thing, right?
It is a good thing in terms of people didn't have to expend energy to do it, but I think also how much they thought about each question was also very minimal. And you'd like people to, like you said, think about it a little bit more, like how much do I care about my toe, and how much do I care about my sense of smell? Like maybe there'd be some like a priming task you could do beforehand to get people more aware of their senses or more aware of something, and see how the priming task then influence their subsequent responding. So like if you had people wiggling their toes for 5 minutes before they did the survey, maybe they'd be like, oh no, my little toe is super important. So
or maybe even just saying how long it takes people to respond. Like, are they faster to say, yes, they give up social media versus giving up their phone, or faster giving up their toe versus their pet? Something that gives it a little more.
Martha, I think we have that data, don't we? Do we have that data on individual questions or not? I think we
do have the time that they spent on each question. But they could have.
They could have like looked away or
like me walked away and come back 10 minutes later because the shiny thing over there happened.
But we could look at this and like, if it's longer than like 3 minutes, we can figure they walked away.
Yeah.
But if it's within like, we can figure out what the average time people were responding to that question. Then we look at like some standard deviations greater than that, then that would potentially indicate I was really paying attention and thinking about this. So that would be, really interesting to look at.
It would be. And I'm curious, is it safe to assume that these, that the questions that you asked were randomized, so that way maybe they saw the dream vacation first and then they saw their left pinky toe compared? Because I could imagine that whatever they're getting anchored with as their first thing, hearing $10,000 versus your pet is going to be very different depending on whatever one comes first, because you kind of go into a certain mindset.
So no, actually, the order of the questionnaire did not vary across respondents. I tried when I wrote it up in the first place to have it be random so that there weren't clusters of types of questions, but I did not set it up so that people received it in a different random order. I mean, one of the things, the two last questions were, I mean, I could have organized it so that they were always going to be where they were, but, you know, just out of simplicity logistics, I just had it always be one order. But that could have been, like, I'm just thinking about if I would have gone back into Qualtrics, I could have made a different block. I could have, you know, but when I made it at the time, I just had it as one set and I just kept it as one set in one order.
Awesome.
But yes, but I mean, I guess, you know, one of the things was the pet question was more towards the end. I think that was actually something that was deliberate and I didn't want to
I thought it would be, yeah. Because it's a little of it's a scary question in a way, right?
Yeah. Well, no matter what, this whole paper that you both worked on together is a wonderful springboard to what is to come out of this. I think that it was really interesting to read through, and I encourage all of our listeners to go and check it out. It is open access, so feel free to go and read it in your leisure time at the pool.
Good night, Martha.
Oh, I can't imagine vacation without the smell of like salty water or chlorine, or it's not vacation without
Exactly. So I do want to make a little time for our game. We're right at time, so I want to make sure that we can get it in. Like I mentioned to you both off the recording, we're going to be doing it broken up into 5 questions and 5 questions. Some for Rachel, and then some for Martha. We're going to start with Martha. So Martha, are you ready to do, it's really simple. Like I'm sure you've done it before, but I'm just going to say a question. Just going to say a word to you. You say the first word that comes to your mind.
Yeah.
All righty.
Okay.
Gender.
Sex.
Smell.
Taste.
Social media.
Trouble.
Priorities.
Kids.
And shopping.
Awful. I hate shopping. I hate it even
You see,
more now.
that's the funny sarcastic thing that we like, right?
Yeah, exactly. All right, Rachel, are you ready?
Go for it.
Adults.
Children.
COVID-19.
Disaster.
iPhone.
Commodity.
Site.
The world.
And the last one, little left toe.
Paul Rosen.
Forever known.
Yes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Infamous little left toe.
Oh, that little left toe.
So I want to ask you both before you leave, can you please share where people could find you if they wanted to reach out to you? Martha, can you share your contact information first?
Absolutely. You can find me anywhere through HCD or just look up my name. Email is martha.bajec@hcdi.net.
Awesome. And then Rachel, would you mind sharing?
Sure, absolutely. So at my website, www.rachelherz.com, you can find out direct contact information and more about me there.
Awesome. All right. Well, thank you
Very
both
fun.
for joining us. This was a fun episode. It was great it feels like the gang got back together. Awesome.
Super fun.
Like a journal
always.
club with the actual authors is so much fun. So
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
So this was great fun. Thank you very much for having me and Martha.
Awesome. Thank you. And take care, everybody.
You too.
For more information or updates, follow HCD Research on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Twitter at HCD Research Inc. and at HCD Neuroscience. Subscribe to our YouTube channel and be sure to rate, review, and follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Thank you and stay tuned for more curious conversations.